Hey, we're here today in New York City, Times Square. I got the Easter Bunny here with me, and we are asking people, what does Jesus have to do with Easter? Easter Bunny's out here today. We're asking questions about Easter. Yeah, Easter.
This, what is it? It is a cat, no?
No, it's not a cat. What animal is it?
I don't know.
It's the Easter Bunny. Have you heard of the Easter Bunny?
No, I very, very busy person.
Why do people celebrate Easter?
I don't know, for candies, I think, to get free candies, the kids, I guess. I have no idea.
I understand that it's more of an economic thing, commercialized.
The more candy they can sell, the better.
More candy they can sell, the more Easter bunnies they can eat.
If you had to guess, what do you think is the reason behind Easter?
I don't know, some holiday. I don't know, Jesus or something. What is it?
So they celebrate that Jesus died and came back from the dead. That's what Easter celebrates.
That's Christmas?
No.
What is Christmas?
They do celebrate that in my country, but we just we just collect chocolates and people give out chocolates, that's all.
That's all they do?
Yeah.
Do you know why people celebrate Easter? What's the main reason why?
I don't really know.
Do you know anything about Jesus? Could you tell us maybe one fact about Jesus or one thing that's about him?
A bunch of people believed he did a lot of miracles in kind of ancient times.
He had really cool hair, according to the pictures.
Oh, he just seemed like a great guy all around. Yeah, no, I've never met him myself. But.
All right, we're going to play a game. It's called Who Said This? Jesus or Kanye West? First one. I live and breathe every element in life. Who said that, Jesus or Kanye?
Jesus.
No, incorrect. Kanye.
Jesus.
No, Kanye.
Jesus. Kanye.
Kanye, that's correct, yeah. The devil dances and eventually answers to the call of autumn. Is that Jesus or is that Kanye West?
Jesus? Jesus.
No, that one's Kanye.
Okay, that's got to be Jesus.
No, that one's Kanye too. Last one. I steal from the rich and I give to the poor.
Jesus Christ.
No, that's actually Robin Hood.
Well, there are upward of 2 billion people celebrating Easter with us this weekend, and it's the #1 attended church service the entire year for Americans. What's the big deal about Easter? Now, people are here undoubtedly at this service for many different reasons. For some of you, it's family tradition, right? You go to church, you get dressed up, and then you go out to eat at grandma's house, and then you do an egg hunt, and then you eat what are the yellow, nasty little rubbery? Those things are gross. How many people like those? All right, beware. These people are sitting next to you, right? Others of you are here because, honestly, you're looking for a date, right? Sort of like Jesus meets Wedding Crashers. You're just going to do it at church, right? Minus the sex and the eternal damnation part, right? Others of you are here because you were invited, right? You would call it blackmailed or threatened, but it beats sleeping on the couch this week, right? We're glad you're here if that's the case. Still, others of you are here because there's something or someone that at least you're opening yourself up to meeting. It's sort of worth a shot, you know? Something deep down is telling you there's something missing either in your life or in your family, uniting your family, and there has to be something more than what's going on, and you're sort of on an exploratory trip coming in to check it out. Again, we welcome you here. There are all kinds of reasons why people come to church together on Easter. So what's the big deal? Like in actual terms, like that will make a difference in our lives. What's the purpose? What's the big deal about Easter? Turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. Mark is a book in the Bible, one of 27 books. It's one of 4 short stories about Jesus called Gospels. And at the very end of each one of these Gospels, it covers an event that we Christians call the resurrection. And we're going to read today and focus on the version in the book of Mark, Mark's story of Jesus. And let me just say, for those of you who are brand new, we're glad you're here, and you should have received a Bible on your way in. And what we want you to do is we want you to take that home as our church's gift to you. Just put your name on it and take it home. And if you come back next week, and hopefully you will, bring that with you. For those of you who aren't like paper reading types, you're more of a Kindle reader kind of a person, you can download on iTunes or Google Play our app. Just type in the words Movie Church all together. You can download our app, and then you can find sermon notes. And when you click that, it'll come directly up. So let me go ahead and let's read it together. Mark 16:1. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Let's pause here. What in the world's going on? Well, the crucifixion of Jesus has just happened, and it happened on a Friday. And it's Jewish custom that you want to bury bodies before the beginning of the Sabbath. The Sabbath, according to Jewish custom, is Friday night to Saturday night. So they were in a rush to find a place where they could put his body. They put his body in the tomb, but that precluded them from being able to do the ceremonial preparations of the body with spices and cloth and everything. So they waited until the Sabbath was over, Sunday morning, and it says on the very first day of the week then, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb. And they asked each other a very logical question. No one's been really working out here. Who's going to roll away that massive stone at the tomb? But they got to the tomb, they looked up, and they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. And so they walked in the tomb, and as they entered the tomb, they saw a man dressed in a white robe, and it wasn't Jesus. And he was sitting on the right side of this tomb, and they completely freaked out. Don't be alarmed, he said. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He's risen. He's no longer here. See the place where they laid, right here. He's not here anymore. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he's going to go ahead and he's going to meet you in Galilee. He's not going to be around this tomb. He's going to meet you guys up in Galilee, where you guys were born and where all your families live. There you will see him, just as he told you. But trembling and bewildered, the women went out of the tomb and fled from it, and they said nothing to anyone. They didn't tell Peter, they didn't tell the disciples, because they were completely afraid. So Easter is about the resurrection of Jesus, right? But why is that so important? What difference does the resurrection make? I'd like to talk about a couple practical, very, very down-to-earth reasons why the resurrection is so important. One is, Jesus' resurrection means that my past mistakes, those things that I've done that I'm not particularly proud of, that maybe I don't tell anybody about, completely wiped clean, gone. A few years ago, Carl Menninger wrote a book called Whatever Became of Sin, and he argued that for people like you and me in the 21st century, we just don't have an awareness of our behaviors, of which ones are right, which ones are wrong, which one are in theological constructs would be sinful, which ones wouldn't. And I just want to disagree with them. I may not be a clinical psychologist, but as a pastor, I just know, I think people are incredibly aware of things that they have done that they feel ashamed about. But does that describe you? Does that describe me? I think we're all in the same boat. I recently heard about a female professional golfer. This female golfer had a hot temper and always had marriage problems, and the neighbors overheard something, and so they called the cops, and this has happened before, and the cops came, and when they knocked on the door was open, and they just walked right directly into the house, and there this female professional golfer there was with blood all over her and a bloody 5-iron in her hand, and there was this lifeless body of a man face down with blood all over it. And so the cop went over and slowly touched her arm and grabbed the club and put it down on the ground and said, "Ma'am, is this your husband?" And she said, "Yeah, it's my husband." And then he asked, "Did you murder him?" And as soon as he said that, she just buried her head in her hands and started weeping uncontrollably. And then the cop asked her, "Is that your club?" "Yes, that's my club." And then he said, "Well, ma'am, how many times did you hit him?" And she said, "I don't know, 5, 6, 7. Just put me down for a 5. And little stupid golfing humor, right? She knew exactly, right? And it's just like all of us. We know exactly days and times and events that we would love to be able to clear out of our mind. And that was definitely the case for this lady named Mary Magdalene. Look again at verse 1 with me. It says, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and then the other women went to anoint Jesus' body. Underline that word Magdalene. Now, we don't know a lot about this woman named Mary, but from the few scant details that we can put together, not a pretty picture. For one, she's called Magdalene. Magdalene is not her last name. It was a slang name that she picked up. Magdalene comes from the word Magdala, which was a town on the western shores of Galilee. Now, this is where Jesus spent most of his time with his followers teaching, and somehow he interacted with this lady named Magdalene. Now, according to the Gospel of Luke, Mary was into some pretty weird stuff. Look, it says, after this, Jesus traveled from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, meaning Jesus, his closest followers. They're called the apostles. They were with him while they were doing all of these trips, but also some women followed along, which was completely unusual in the first century. You wouldn't have rabbis with women being invited into their inner circle. And there were also some women who were cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. Evidently, when Jesus met Mary, he basically ejected, this evil presence from her life. Modern day people call that demon possession. And Mary didn't have just one demon. The Bible said she had 7 demons, which is the Bible's way of, this is a perfect number, and it's also the Bible's way of saying this chick was into some pretty weird stuff. So we can surmise that when Jesus met her, she wasn't called Mary Magdalene for nothing. They were like, "Oh, you're talking about, that Mary. Or you're talking about the town whore, Mary." We know who you're talking about. Now, there are probably some people here this morning that have some things in their past, things that they're presently doing, just wish weren't there. Now, it doesn't mean that you have 7 demons living inside of you and, you're going to have your head spin around backwards like the movie The Exorcist at the end where they throws up on the priest with all the green stuff. That would make for an awesome Easter service, wouldn't it? That'd be entertaining. Your kids would never forget that one. But maybe you don't have it that bad, but there are some things that you're just not proud of. And what Easter reminds us is, no matter what you've done, and I mean that, no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, no matter who you used to be, no matter if you believe in God or what you think of God or you have it all figured out or you're a Christian, you're not, it doesn't matter. No matter how strange it feels to be in church this morning, you matter to God. We celebrate the resurrection because it reminds us that he loves us. Jesus' victory over sin, like that song talks about, demonstrated in the power of the resurrection, communicates that you and I can start over. Now listen, you might be into drugs. It doesn't matter. I mean, you might still be high this morning. It doesn't matter. He still loves you. You might be embezzling funds from the office. It doesn't matter. He still loves you. You might be a huge Garth Brooks or Kenny Chesney fan. And in that case, hey, you know what? There's always Buddhism. You know what I'm saying? Jesus has standards, okay? And that's about as far as he's willing to go. Embezzlement's one thing. Country music, completely different one, right? But it doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what you've done. We celebrate the fact that Jesus died and rose from the dead, and we matter to him. Our past can be wiped clean. Here's the second thing. The resurrection reminds us that my present problems can be managed. Lean to the person next to you and look in the eyes and figure out if they have some weird habits. Just really quick, right? Raise your hand if you're sitting, you're like, I'm convinced this person has some weird habits about them, right? All right. Now, what I love about Christianity is there's no shame in admitting that, right? You've got stuff, I've got stuff, we're all in this together. We're all kind of weird. We all have issues and problems and that sort of thing. But not this woman, Mary, because once she became a Christian, she was super awesome perfect. Look at this passage. It says, continuing, we started out reading the Gospel of Mark and we ended in verse 8. Let's pick that up in verse 9. When Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. She went and actually told those who had been with him, who were mourning and weeping. Didn't matter how scared these other women were and freaked out. She took it upon herself to go tell the other ones. And then Jesus appeared, and later he appeared to the 11. And then he told them in verse 15, I want you guys to go into all the world, and I want you to tell people what I've done. And then he said, listen, some really cool stuff is going to happen when you do this. Verse 17. These signs are going to accompany those who believe. They're going to pick up snakes with their hands. How many of you hate snakes like me? I am petrified. I hate snakes. God made a mistake when he made snakes. They will drink deadly poison, and it won't hurt them. Like, they're just going to drink it. It's not going to hurt them. They're going to place their hands on sick people, and bam, instantly they're going to get healed. And that's what Mary did. Mary was the first one of all these people did that. They were amazing, powerful, perfect Christians. You know what the problem is with verses 9 through 20? Jesus never said any of that stuff. Jesus never said any of that. Long about the 3rd or the 4th century, the best that we can tell, there was this scribe, basically a monk, basically transcribing the ending of Mark, and he got to verse 8, and he read, trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. And he thought to himself, well, that's not right. I'll make a better ending. And he started writing all of these crazy, amazing things. You want to know how someone made that up? Is because when there were manuscripts, there were multiple copies, and then there were full streams of manuscripts that were copied. So that's why you can trust what's in the Bible, because you're able to check it with other manuscript streams. And so our translators of the Bible that we handed out, the NIV translation, put this little phrase at the end. The earliest manuscripts and some ancient witnesses do not have Mark 16, 9 through 20. In other words, someone made it up. But we'll put it in there because it was something that people wrote down. Now, you want to know the best part of this story of Mark's version? God inspired that story. Basically, he was saying, you know what? Just like the women who ran away afraid, after actually seeing the resurrection, and they ran away afraid. I know you get scared. I know you have problems. I love you anyway. You don't have to act like you're some super special, perfect Christian at all. Jesus is like, I know your fears, your anxieties, your hang-ups, your addictions, everything about you, and I still love you. Now, here's the third thing the resurrection means. The resurrection means I can be 100% confident that I will go to heaven when I die. Jesus said in John 11, verse 25, you tell me if you've heard this before. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? You know, you're probably going to think I'm weird, but I think one of the things I love most about being a pastor is when someone is in the hospital and they're dying. And we're all on a rotation where different pastors will go at different times, and I'll go and visit, and I'll sit down and I'll talk to that person, because it's like they're like minutes or hours away from the finish line. And I get to be there and watch them when they cross the line. And I remember a number of years ago, very, very good friend of mine here at CCV was dying of cancer, put up an amazing fight. And unlike those of you who have cancer and God has healed you and You've moved on. This was not that particular story. And I went to visit him in the hospital, and I'd been meeting with him, and his wife told me that this is it. This is going to be his last day. Would you mind coming? I said, of course. I remember walking into the room, and I remember telling him, because I just remember I was telling him stories about the resurrection, about the new life that he was at. This passage, quoting this passage to him, and I don't know how much he heard, how much he understood, but I have friends who are chaplains who basically went to seminary and they lost their faith in seminary, but by that time they had too much invested, so they became chaplains at hospital. That's what often happens for people. Though there are some amazing chaplains out there, but there's just a lot of people who become atheists, and we're like, well, I got to get a job somewhere. Might as well do it somewhere. I can't do it in a church because they won't hire me, so they'll get a job as a chaplain in a hospital. And what they'll do is they'll go into a room when someone's dying, and they will read this passage, John 11, I'm the resurrection and the life, but they don't believe it. I'm convinced there's a special place in hell for pastors who do that. Because what we celebrate here this morning is not a comfort if it's not true. Now, there are all kinds of reasons I believe in the resurrection. I believe in the resurrection because Jesus appeared first to women who were then to go and tell the disciples. In the first century, women were not considered credible legal witnesses. And so you can just imagine if they were trying to make up a story about Jesus rising from the dead, but the body wasn't stolen, he actually rose from the dead, the people that you said saw it first would not be women. The other thing is that the tomb was sealed, and so they put a string and then a wax seal with the Roman seal right in the middle, which basically was tantamount to breaking Roman law if you broke the seal. In other words, you have this hungry, sleepless, ragtag group of fishermen, just a handful of them, but you have stationed around the tomb this whole regiment of Roman soldiers. Probably not likely that I'm going to be taking on a mixed martial artist, guy, let alone 20 of them sitting around the room, While I may think I may get one good punch in, I'm not going to actually take on a regiment of soldiers in the same way the disciples breaking in past the Roman soldiers and then daring to break the seal would have really stolen the body. Now, the other reason that I believe in the resurrection is because when the Gospels tell the story of the resurrection, they disagree on minor details. Now, that concerns some Bible-believing Christians when they hear that there are minor discrepancies and disagreements in the foundational story of our faith. Matthew chapter 28 says, there was a violent earthquake, for the angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. There was an angel, right? Mark's version says, as they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Luke's version said, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. And I'll talk to people who are like, why would you believe that then? Is it one man? Is it an angel? Is it 2 angels? Just recently here, there was a bomb that went off at a soccer stadium in Iraq. A few dozen people just killed right there on the spot. As people were streaming out of the stadium in the middle of this chaotic event, police officers could have grabbed 20 of them and put them on a wall and asked them, what happened? Give me the exact details of what happened. What happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? And if you went through with a notebook and wrote down every single detail that they shared, I guarantee you all 20 of them would have disagreed with one another on minor details. Where did the bomber come in? I actually think the bomber was over here, and I think, well, how many? There were 2, I don't know, there were 3, there was 1, I don't know. Every single one of them would have disagreed on minor details, but they all would have said a bomber came into the stadium, blew himself up, and there were a lot of people lying around dead. Every single one of them. And it's the same thing with the resurrection stories. I have conversations with skeptics all the time where they will say, this is why I don't believe in the Bible. And I will say, dude, you don't understand. This is why I believe in the Bible. If 20 people would have lined up coming rushing out of a stadium, and in that state of mind, they would have had the exact same story all the way to the tiny detail of what the shoes were, I would have said, I don't know, man. That's kind of fishy, don't you think? But the gospel writers, they knew. They used the documents. They used each other when they were writing. They didn't turn around and clean everything up. They presented it as it was reported. Why? Because they knew that they believed in what was written. Now, speaking of skeptics and people who are here today who might have questions about religion, in 2 weeks, in 2 Sundays, on Sunday morning, because of the constant questions I at least have and the people that are in this congregation have about Islam and its role in the world and its role in terrorism, I've asked internationally renowned Muslim cleric Dr. Shabir Ali to be with us in 2 weeks, and we're going to have a friendly conversation, debate about Islam and Christianity. And what I'm going to be doing is I need you to help me, to give me the questions that you want me to ask him. So in your program, there's a yellow card. Can you reach in your program and grab this card? I want you, between the time right now and when the service ends, I want you to write down for me the one question that you want me to ask Dr. Ali. Now, here's what I said last week when I announced this. He is brilliant and he's humble. He's not one of these crazy radicals that you see on TV. I'm pretty sure he's going to kick my butt in 2 weeks. So come back for that if for no other reason. You're going to see this guy just completely eat my lunch. But I promise you that I'm going to ask the questions that you give me, and I'm not going to pull any punches. And I think that the whole morning is going to be something that I think you would find very, very valuable. So if you can ask a question, write it down, fold it in half. When you leave today, put it in the bowls where the ushers are when they leave. Now, the last reason I believe in the resurrection is that nobody dies for a lie. Nobody denies that the tomb was empty. The question is, why was it empty? First century Jews said it was because the disciples stole the body. The disciples claimed they saw something, and they went out and they died for it. Terrible, horrible deaths. Friends, something happened. The most logical explanation is what happened is that Jesus said would happen. He actually rose from the dead. And when he rose from the dead, he came back and said, it's real. I'm not making this up. In fact, I'm going to a place, and if I go there, I'm going to come back for you so that you may be where I am. And that's what we celebrate here this morning. Not just our past can be forgiven, not that our present stuff and our problems can be managed, but the confidence, like 100% confidence, that when we die, we can be with him forever. That's why when I left the hospital that day, the last thing I said is I leaned over to my friend and whispered in his ear, I'll see you on the other side. I'll see you on the other side, brother. I'll be there soon. I'll see you on the other side. And that's what we're going to celebrate right now with the Lord's Supper. We're going to celebrate communion right now. And for those of you who have never seen this, because you haven't been in church ever or this is new, this is a little ceremony that Jesus asked for his followers to do to remember the sacrifice that he made. So the ushers are going to come. They're going to pass trays. You're going to grab one cup. And you're going to hold it, and that cup represents his blood, and then you're going to grab a piece of bread, and that bread represents his broken body. And then Jesus said, whenever you do this, whenever you celebrate this, remember the sacrifice I made and the fact that I'm coming again for you. And so as they pass the trays, take a piece of bread, take a cup, and then hold on to them. After everyone has been served, we'll partake of the Lord's Supper together.